The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 191.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems on a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about that hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the Big Finish audio story, Storm Warning, featuring the 8th Doctor. Joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. And you can be sure to retweet our episodes on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. And please leave comments and engage with us on social media. We love to have conversations with you and connect with you there. So check us out. So as I said, we're discussing the Big Finish audio story, Storm Warning. Jimmy, could you give a very quick reminder to folks who may be new what Big Finish is?
Yeah, so Big Finish is a company in Britain that produces audio plays, at least primarily. That's what they're known for. They got their start kind of in the era after Doctor Who was off the air, and they began as kind of one of a number of fan productions that would try to keep Doctor Who materials being produced during the long dark. Between Sylvester McCoy's last episode in 1989 and Christopher Eccleston's first episode in 2005. There were a bunch of fan efforts to try to, keep the flame alive. Some of them involved actors from the show, but they couldn't call them the Doctor because they didn't have the license. So, like, Colin Baker became the Stranger, and his companion was Miss Brown, but it was clearly meant to be the Doctor and Perry.
Right.
But Big Finish got a license, and so they started producing authentic new Doctor Who stories, and they also featured actors from the show. And so in 1996, Paul Mcgann had the pilot TV movie Doctor Who that he did, so he became the 8th Doctor. But they didn't continue that in video form until, a couple of decades later, when he got to, or almost a couple decades later, when he did like a 8-minute Night of the Doctor video. But he did do and went on to become one of the most popular Doctors on Big Finish. And his audio adventures are numerous for Big Finish. The one we're talking about today, Storm Warning, is the very first one he did. This is his return to the role of the Doctor after the TV movie. And his Big Finish stuff became so popular that in Night of the Doctor, where he actually returns to film as the Doctor, he name checks companions as he's about to regenerate. Like a lot of doctors, he thinks about his companions, and he names a Big Finish companion. So in that monologue, a Physician Heal Thyself monologue he gives, he names Charley, who is the first one we'll meet in this episode. He also names others like Cariz and so forth.
And I should point out that this was released, I almost said aired, but it was released in January of 2001. So it was about 5 years after the movie, the Fox American movie was made.
And 4 years before the new show.
Right. And we're doing this. We're going to now be regularly doing 8th Doctor Big Finish audio productions because, as you said, Jimmy, there's so many of them, and he is an official Doctor. He's listed in the official canon, such as it is, as the Eighth Doctor. And so these are real, as much as anything is real stories. And, we're going through each of the Doctors, the first through 13th Doctors, on a rotating basis. And we thought, we should be doing more of the Eighth Doctor. These are good stories. As you've heard, we did Chimes of Midnight at Christmas time of 2019. And as you'll hear from this one, these are good, fun stories.
Yeah. Wouldn't be Christmas without Mrs. Baddeley's plum pudding.
That's right.
Well, it's good to get some exposure to these stories because, I'm coming in, I think, like Dom, really have not heard any of the Big Finish stuff until now, that this is the first we've really heard of it. I'd heard of Big Finish because it has been around for a while, kind of funny to think about it, 20 years plus, but it's something that I think a lot of Doctor Who fans maybe don't have exposure to because they only have the TV stuff at most that they're familiar with.
And it's unique because a lot of other fandoms don't have this sort of thing. They don't have the audio plays by the actors who did the roles. You don't have it for Star Wars or Star Trek or anything like that. So this is a great thing that Doctor Who has that other things don't have.
It's fun too because the fact is, in many cases, a lot of like the old style radio dramas died off.
Yeah.
But yet there's still things like this available where they're not audiobooks. These aren't audiobooks. These are audio
plays.
Dramas. They are audio plays. They are the old style radio dramas where, you hear a gun, like in this one, you hear a gunshot off. Oh, he killed another dead alien, just making it clear. He shot him and killed him. You can't portray that visually. So you have to make sure to tell the story to show that, yes, this alien is now dead.
And there are some neat tricks that old-time radio would use. I'm something of a fan of old-time radio, and I once attended a panel at a sci-fi convention called "Wait, What Are You Doing with That Gun?" which was devoted to the problems of audio storytelling. Also, another difference with other fandoms is the fan productions in other fandoms tend to not be high quality, if I can put it delicately. But Big Finish basically became professional. I mean, their early productions were shaky, but they are professional today, and they crank out good audio stories, like Live 34, which we did.
Yes. Well, and one advantage, of course, of doing audio is the barrier to entry is much, much lower, as we know as podcasters. It's much easier to produce just good audio than it is to produce both good audio and good video and good special effects and.
Yeah.
And you could do so much more with audio that you could never produce on screen without millions of dollars.
Yep.
All right. So let's get into this story. It surrounds events on an airship, a British airship in October 1930, the R101. Was this a real incident? Okay, so this is essentially like Britain's Hindenburg disaster.
Yes.
If you want to talk about it.
Basically what it is. Americans don't know about R101 in the main, but this is basically the British equivalent of the Hindenburg.
Yes.
Right. And so it starts with, it doesn't start, it starts with the Doctor on the TARDIS, basically, the Eighth Doctor, looking for the TARDIS manual, which is fun because, that comes up once in a while in the show. And he finds an Agatha Christie novel, then he finds Mary Shelley's writing about the night with Lord Byron that we just saw in the 13th Doctor's story, the Lone Cyberman.
Yeah, and I should mention here, so he's got like a signed copy of Frankenstein or something, and he talks about that night, and he says, "Oh, Mary, if you could have only told the real story," implying that the Doctor has been there before, and Big Finish will eventually show us that. One of the things they had in the 1996 movie were all these Frankenstein illusions, where the Doctor, who's a kind of Byronic character, he looks like a character from that era, and he has this kind of romantic flair and so forth, and then he like regenerates and comes to life in a lightning storm, and it's very Frankenstein-like, and it's very conscious on their part. Well, it made sense then to insert Paul McGann's Eighth Doctor into the events of that night. And even though this is the first time that he's returned to the role, so we haven't heard it yet, they will go back and tell us the Eighth Doctor version of those events, and Mary Shelley becomes a traveling companion for a few adventures.
Yeah.
And as you would expect, gets ideas for future stories based on those adventures.
Yes.
But we will see that. And then, of course, most recently, they've revisited those same events on TV with the 13th Doctor. And in Doctor Who, everything gets to be canonical because Time War changed everything.
Yep.
That's right. So while he's looking for the manual, he encounters a time ship caught in a space-time glitch. And it's I guess it's dying over and over, like it's caught in this loop, a la Star Trek. And he ends up using the TARDIS to nudge it out of the time glitch, and he gets stuck. And then there are these Vortisaurs, which are like time vultures.
That look like dinosaurs.
Right. And they break into the TARDIS. They actually are able to get into the TARDIS, which is unusual. We never, like, that time ship is sort of a MacGuffin. It never comes back, does it?
No, I like the way he says, because it's caught in this, crashing in this paradox, he says, what a horrible way to never die.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't nudge it forward, they'll just keep dying. And so he's going to try to nudge it forward so they can finally all die and rest in peace. And we don't get closure on that. My guess, not in this story anyway, my guess, my headcanon for now, is that it's actually the TARDIS. That he just doesn't realize that he is caught in this and he nudges it forward. But they don't.
Okay.
That's open to interpretation. I do like the Vortisaurs, though, that are creatures that live in the vortex. They're apparently kind of like pterodactyls. And at first I thought, they're like the Reapers in the Ninth Doctor story, Father's Day. They're going after paradoxes.
Yep.
But it appears that that's not the case. They go after other things. The Vortisaur that we end up with, there's one Vortisaur that ends up sticking around. And he actually becomes a sort of traveling companion creature with the Doctor and Charley for several adventures.
He's becomes like a pet.
It's like he's like a sci-fi pet, yeah.
And then we switch to a radio broadcast about the His Majesty's airship R101 on its maiden flight in 1930, heading to India.
Voiced by Mark Gatiss.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Mark Gatiss. That makes sense, because Mark Gatiss was involved in the creation of Big Finish, I guess, right?
Yes.
He was one of the principals.
Well, he worked on quite a bit of, I believe, some of the earlier stuff. So
okay, and then we have a Lord Tamworth and a Lieutenant Colonel Frayling. Frayling is the designer of the airship, and Tamworth, I think, is the Civil Aviation Authority head or something like that.
And these characters are all fictional. So R101 crash is real, but the characters they use in the story are all fiction.
Based off real people who were involved in the actual R101.
Yeah, it wouldn't really be appropriate to use the people who died in the crash and so tragically and use them as characters in this. Yeah, so I get that. Yeah. Frayling and Tamworth have this discussion about modifications that Tamworth made to the airship without Frayling's knowledge. And it's something important to think about with airships, early airships, is as lighter than aircraft, every ounce counted. And they made these things like the chairs were made out of specifically light wood. Everything was chosen for how light it was. And so the idea that Tamworth would make modifications that added half a ton of weight to the airship is significant. And so apparently Tamworth is running some sort of secret mission with a secret cargo that Frayling was unaware of, and that becomes clear up front. By the way, Frayling is played by or voiced by Nicholas Pegg, who often voices Daleks in the TV show.
And Lord Tamworth is voiced by Gareth Thomas, if I'm saying that right, who was Blake of Blake 7.
Oh, yeah, okay. We've had a lot of Blake 7 and Doctor Who lately that we've discussed. And Tamworth is concerned with a passenger in cabin 43. That's that comes up. Not 42 or 47, which are both significant numbers, but 43. Meanwhile, on the TARDIS, the Doctors have succeeded in pushing this time ship out, and he gets stuck. Then we're back to the airship, where we meet Charlotte Pollard, or as we'll come to know her, Charley. She's writing down her some memoir about her trip, And it turns out she's pretending to be a boy on the crew, a steward, and she's dressed up as a boy. She's stowed away.
And this is sort of a trope in British literature of a certain age where you have women passing as men. I mean, it's all over Shakespeare.
Right.
happens all the time there. And I've seen references to it like happening in later time periods, like the 1700s, the 1800s. And so, I don't know, maybe this was a thing. I've never really verified this, but Charley really wants to be an adventuress. I mean, she even describes herself in her journal as an Edwardian adventuress.
Right.
And adventuress had a double meaning, which wasn't always on the strictly up and up, but Charley seems to be the more innocent kind of adventuress.
Okay, good.
And so this is a way to do that, to be free of the constraints of, because she's from the upper class, to be free from the expectations of being an upper class lady is to go out disguised as a lower class man.
Well, I'm guessing too that they only had stewards, not stewardesses, to use the antiquated term. So
all
the only
the
way
crew
she
was
could have,
male.
so the only way she could have gotten onto the ship was to dress up as a young boy instead of a woman.
And I guess she's got to be like late teens. I think. I mean, like she's young. She's like maybe 19, 20s at most, or somewhere around there. And she reminds me a lot. It's both in this one and in the one we've listened to before, Giants of Midnight. She reminds me a lot of Ace.
Yeah.
Although
more
of
upper class.
Of an upper class, yeah. Mm-hmm. But sort of the spirit of Ace in her. So that I do enjoy her so far.
What she and Ace have in common is a great deal of self-confidence.
Yep.
It's like she will just roll with stuff, but she does have upper class attitude. She's not as wounded as Ace, and she doesn't blow things up the way Ace does. But in terms of self-confidence, she's got that in spades.
And kind of an awareness too of what's going on. She's able to kind of look and see what's, figure things out, because she kind of figured the Doctor out fairly quickly, actually.
Yeah.
That, okay, there's something more to you than what you're showing us.
Like the best companion, she rolls with it. She accepts the impossible and the crazy and goes with it and embraces it. So the TARDIS arrives on the airship in the ballast tank of the airship, and which is bad because that ballast tank is supposed to be empty and throws off the balance of the ship. So as the Doctor climbs up into the ship's main body, the big open space of the ship itself, the hatch closes behind him, and they flush out the TARDIS. So we have TARDIS separation here. The TARDIS is ejected from the ship somewhere over France at this point. And so that is a major plot point here. Frayling, meanwhile, says that there's a storm coming. So we have the storm warning of the title. And the storm that eventually, in real life, is what takes down the R101. It crashes in the storm.
Yep.
Charley is unmasked as a stowaway fairly quickly, and takes off and runs away while they're trying to restrain her.
And apparently, she is impersonating a real steward.
Right.
That she apparently got drunk and, I don't know, bashed on the head or something and took his place.
Or probably just got him completely blitzed and he passed out and she snuck out before he could recover.
Right. The Doctor, meanwhile, has made his way to cabin 43 and listens to hear what's going on inside. And it sounds like someone is gagged or restrained and being injected with something he hears. And that's when Charley comes around the corner and literally runs into the Doctor. And then we have a storm has come on, and Frayling, looking out a window, sees something on the outside of the ship, which is shades of Twilight Zone, the movie. And William Shatner seeing the thing on the wing. Or was that the original, actually, the original Twilight Zone?
It's the original Twilight Zone.
Yep.
That's right. And we have it's one of the Vortisaurs, which apparently came through the time vortex with the TARDIS, and it's on the outside of the R101, which is a big gas bag, and the Vortisaur has talons, which those don't mix.
Yeah.
So the Doctor figures out that he's on the R101, and as the Doctor always does, he knows all of history, and he knows it's October 1930, and that the ship will crash in France early the next morning in a storm with no survivors. Which now sets up our event.
And that's actually not what happened in our timeline. There were like 8 survivors, but 2 of them died from injuries, so there ended up being 6 survivors. But that would complicate our plot and undo the paradox the Doctor is going to have at the end of the episode. So in this version of the timeline, it has to be no survivors.
Yeah, that's interesting thing, though, is because it was everybody remembers, the foot or has seen the footage of the Hindenburg crash. I mean, it was just horrific. This was actually, it sounded like a fairly gentle landing, but there was so much damage to the ship that it immediately burst on fire as soon as it landed.
Right. In fact, there were people who survived the Hindenburg even, too, which is interesting. So the Vortisaur ends up crashing through cabin 43's window and attacks Tamworth's valet, the South African Mr. Rathbone, who is very sinister throughout this, who seems to have his own agenda throughout the story, although he supposedly works for Tamworth. And so it crashes through, it attacks him, and the Doctor comes in to save the day. He says at one point, we used to ride Vortisaurs bareback in the Time Lord Academy.
Playing Quidditch, no doubt.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Right. But also, hang a lantern on that. Chekhov's Vortisaur will be coming back in the 4th act. And the person that he heard it was being restrained in the cabin is in a deep-sea diver's suit. So
being
very
fed
strange.
with oxygen through tubes.
Right. Now the Doctor and the Vortisaur, attacks Rathbone and then runs off, and so the Doctor and the Chief Steward named Weeks, they go hunting the Vortisaur, leaving Charley behind with Rathbone and this person.
Apparently, the Vortisaur doesn't like coffee. It wasn't that it was hot; it did like the bitterness of the coffee. Right.
So Frayling now is concerned that the airship is damaged and needs to land, but Tamworth is, no, we must go on. So we have this drive to go on. We must continue. The Doctor recognizes Tamworth's name from the history books, and because he encounters Tamworth and Frayling, and we have this whole another trope from that Doctor Who often has, which is the misidentification of the Doctor, who he really is. And Tamworth thinks he's a German spy for the Zeppelin.
This is a fun one. Yeah.
Yes. He calls himself Johann Schmidt instead of John Smith.
Yep.
And because he's not British, they're going to hand him over to authorities once they land instead of executing him on the spot.
Right. So he'll be handed over to authorities and then killed. They would have had to kill him on the spot if he was just a British stowaway.
Yep.
So the Doctor is going to communicate to Charley. It's like, we've been caught, Charley. We may as well give it up now that they've found out we're German spies, right?
Wink, wink, wink. Yeah.
I also like how I think it's Tamworth compliments. So they think he's a spy for the Zeppelin company, and that's why he's here, is to scope out the competition of, with the R101 as a rival to the Hindenburg, which is on the drawing boards but hasn't been made yet.
Right.
And they compliment the Doctor's English as, your English is really good, though not quite good enough to pass muster. Which is funny. And so the Doctor then starts introducing deliberate mistakes into his English, where he says, well, I have what you say, a pigeon of English. Oh, a smidgen of English.
Yeah, right. So, and they're all very civilized, as they always would be in an Edwardian British situation like this, as they're threatening his life. It's very civilized. And Tamworth reveals that they're due to ascend to 5,000 feet for a rendezvous, which is interesting, which is twice or 3 times, they're not really clear on it, the ship's rated altitude. So Frayling is really concerned at this point. So the Doctor and Tamworth go to visit the passenger, who's in distress due to the altitude for some reason. And then
I've
take
been on an unpressurized plane. Yeah, I know what that's like.
Right. They take the helmet off at this point, and as they describe it, sort of these big eyes, gray skin. I'm thinking, is it a gray? Is it an alien like the Area 51 Roswell gray?
They don't settle that. They don't call it a gray, which they wouldn't have that term for it anyway.
Yeah.
I was listening as well. They establish it has super smooth skin like a dolphin, and even though it's apparently a female, Rathbone refers to and we'll meet more of these aliens later, but Rathbone refers to them as little gray men. So I
Right.
think we're meant to imagine that it's a classical gray, just like we saw in the animated Doctor Who adventure.
Yep.
That's right. That's right. There's similarities between that and this story. As the airship reaches its rendezvous altitude, it becomes clear they're rendezvousing with a flying saucer. A giant flying saucer arrives. I mean, this is big enough to contain the airship within it. And we find out the alien is called the Engineer Prime, or Prime Engineer. They do a Yoda reversal of names of the Triskeli, they call themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The R101 passes through the hull of the flying saucer to go inside, and they have constructed a
landing bay.
A landing bay. Yeah, there's a landing mast.
Mooring tower.
Mooring tower. Right. It's very interesting. We have a bit of the Time Lord triumphant feel to the Doctor at this point. He gives this speech about, do you recognize that feeling inside, that stepping into adventure and trespassing into the unknown? And then it echoes, unknown, unknown, unknown. I mean, there's that really like that sort of feeling you get when it's whether it's a Tennant or Matt Smith kind of doing that Time Lord triumphant sort of thing. I just thought it was funny.
At least he doesn't go Time Lord victorious and want to bend the laws of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Although he does, spoiler, end up doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of unintentionally.
Yep.
So Tamworth wants to take, a bunch of people into this meeting that he's going to have with the aliens, but the aliens will only allow a delegation of 3 onto their ship for very specific reasons, and insist that it must be Tamworth, Frayling, and the Doctor. So it's very interesting that they ask for the Doctor, but Tamworth is okay to go with it. He wants this meeting.
By the way, one thing that went by pretty quickly that we should mention, because it'll be important later, even though it's not really important in this story. In talking to Charley, the Doctor learns where she's going. She's not just aimlessly adventuring. She has a specific place she wants to get to by a specific time. She knew a guy named Alex Grail who told her something like, oh, you haven't lived until you've had a Singapore sling on the terrace of the Singapore Hilton. And so a Singapore sling is a drink.
It's gin sling. It actually sounds like an interesting drink.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've never known what the ingredients are, but I've heard of it. In any event, she wants to get to Singapore so she can have a Singapore sling on the terrace of the Singapore Hilton on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1930. So that's her goal. It's kind of ambiguous. Is she going to meet Grail there herself or not? But that's going to be a running thread in Charley's future story.
Okay.
She and Alex Grail and getting to Singapore in time.
Okay. So at this point, we do also get revealed that neither Tamworth nor the Doctor trust Rathbone, who is being left behind and doesn't like it. There's elements of him they don't trust. The interior of the spaceship is described as being so vast that they can't see to either end. So this is one massive flying saucer. Tamworth says, it then explains what's going on. The previous year, he was notified of a UFO crash in the UK. When he got there, it was dissolving. The ship was dissolving, and all that was left was the Engineer Prime. At first, they couldn't communicate with him until one night, Rathbone showed up out of nowhere, and I thought that was very interesting. And Rathbone took them to a spiritualist medium named Madame Zelda, who was able to get the Engineer Prime to start communicating. And the Engineer Prime says, oh, I didn't talk earlier. And they kind of, they imply or even outright say that they basically tortured the alien to get him to talk, or her to talk. And she says she didn't talk earlier because Zelda was the first creator she'd spoken to, which is interesting. So she starts to kind of refer to different kinds of people, and that's important.
Yeah, previously she had only had contact with uncreators, and now she knew by meeting this medium who is the real thing that our planet also contains higher orders besides just uncreators.
Right.
And basically you figure out from context an uncreator is like a military person, like the military
someone
people.
Violent. Someone who destroys instead of creates.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of violent, Rathbone reveals to Charley that he's got this arsenal of weapons on the airship. This is where the half-ton of extra weight came from. Machine guns and grenades and all kinds of things.
Half a ton of weapons. That's a pretty good arsenal.
Yes. It turns out that the Triskeli used to be conquerors, feared throughout the universe, as we always are. They have a 3-part symbol that represents them, and they find one on the floor that the Doctor and Tamworth or Frayling are told to stand on in the 3 parts, and then they're transported to another part of the ship.
Notice their name also Triskeli, so it's got a 3 there, the
right.
tri.
Are they gamesters at all, do you think?
I think they probably like games, yeah.
Well, 10,000 quatlos on that guy, on the Doctor. So the Triskeli they're a people that are divided into 3 parts. The first is the rational creators, and that includes the engineers, like Engineer Prime. Then there are the uncreators who embody the dark side, the destroyers, the all-instinct aspects of the Triskeli personality. And they're looking for human uncreators to go up against, to match themselves against. And they reject Tamworth because while he used to be a soldier, that's Engineer Prime brought Tamworth because he used to be a soldier serving in the army. He's not really violent or aggressive at this point.
He's not an uncreator anymore, and it's implied because of what he saw at the Battle of Jericho, which was a battle in World War I. It occurred in 1918, and Lord Tamworth apparently was horrified by the carnage he saw there, and it turned him off the violence. So he's no longer an uncreator, but they brought him here because they think he is.
Yes. And the uncreators have sensed Rathbone telepathically, and they think he's the one who's the real uncreator among everyone else, and turns out he is. And so they said, you should have brought him instead. And the Doctor here, I think it's here where the Doctor makes a reference to the Battle of Rorke's Drift, which is a battle that happened in South Africa
Mm-hmm.
Between the British and Zulu tribes, which was a fascinating story. Which I wonder if they ever did that in Doctor Who. The Doctor shows up there, but it's a fascinating.
Well, he
story.
Obviously does one of these. Well, that's not how I remember it.
Yeah,
or at least as I remember it, so that he was there. But whether or not they actually told that story is another story.
Yeah. And then the third group of Triskeli consists of a single person, the lawgiver, and there's only one of him. The lawgiver is the conscience and free will of the Triskeli. And what they did was they paired up with each of the humans, so Frayling and the engineers, Tamworth and the uncreators, and the Doctor and the lawgiver. They've sensed something about the Doctor.
Yeah, and it's the lawgiver's job to decide between whether the creators or the uncreators are going to have their way. So in a way, this is kind of like Freud's id, ego, and superego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
where you have the ego having to integrate the impulses from the id and the superego.
Right. And that's what the lawgiver says. They used to be integrated. They used to be. We all had all 3 aspects of our personality, but we consumed ourselves and we separated the remainder into 3 parts. And the lawgiver cannot have children, so therefore the lawgiver is ancient and is dying, and they're looking for a new lawgiver.
So you can guess who's that going to be. And then fortunately, they very quickly dismissed the Doctor because they wanted a human lawgiver, not an alien. And the Doctor's like, oh, well, that's a relief.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, the Doctor has to reveal that he is, in fact, an alien, too. Now, Rathbone is acting on separate orders from Tamworth, his own secret orders. He's going to attack the aliens and demand they provide a reward of their technology for saving the Engineer Prime, basically, returning him. They want to have their technology if they don't give it willingly, which it just seems like a bad idea. I mean, they're so advanced technologically, you don't think that maybe they might be a little stronger than you are, with arms and whatever. But okay.
This is I think where the story gets a little weak, but not the idea of the attack, but he has exactly half an hour to get this agreement and that was just, and obviously it's to make the story short, and this is all happening within the course of an evening or a night, but still that's where it's kind of like, okay, exactly a half an hour to convince these aliens, turn over your spaceship so that we can conquer the world, basically.
Yeah, in real life it would be like, I've only got 6 months until the negotiations need to be complete, or
right, exactly. So as we said, the engineers had been sent to Earth to find a new lawgiver, and because they nominated the Doctor and he's not human, their nomination is invalid. So that gives the uncreators the upper hand in their society at this point. And meanwhile, Rathbone is rejecting Tamworth's authority. Tamworth is trying to get him to stop the attack. And Rathbone rejects his authority. He says, I've got my own orders. And he ends up shooting the lawgiver when he refuses to hand over the ship, not knowing that now that the law is dead, literally, the Uncreators have been unleashed. They can do whatever they want. And it turns out this is what the Uncreators wanted all along. They were hoping for this result.
They were basically controlling Rathbone and getting him to do their will.
Yeah.
Right. They manipulated this.
It was explained that the Uncreators wanted to kill the lawgiver and everybody else.
Yep. Right, because that's what they do. They were Uncreators. So the airship crew has been armed, and they start shooting at the Uncreators. But it turns out that the Uncreators are not all that great of soldiers, because when the humans yell at them, they cower in fear. Like they're not doing so well here. And they've been chained for so long that they don't recognize other predators. I think that's what the Doctor says.
Yep.
And so the Doctor tells the Engineer Prime to yell at the Uncreators to let them know that he's mad as hell and he's not going to take it anymore, which is a reference to
Network.
What was Network? The movie Network, right? So Uncreator Prime starts shooting back, but Tamworth steps up and declares his candidacy as Lawgiver Prime. And then we get a boxing match, basically.
Yeah.
Tamworth, who's got some background in boxing, challenges him to a boxing match, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, the fight of the century.
And here we get another classic reference, only this time in the mouth of Uncreator Prime, because Tamworth refers to the art of boxing.
Yep.
Yes.
Uncreator Prime says, I do not know about art of man, but I know what I like, and slugs him.
Yes, right. And so
from the classic
Tamworth
quote, I don't know about art, but I know what I like.
Yep, exactly.
Yes, right. Tamworth ends up with the upper hand. He gets, but Uncreator Prime takes control of Rathbone, like telepathic control, and gets him to shoot Tamworth. But tries to get him to shoot him, but instead Rathbone shoots the Uncreator Prime. So now Tamworth is in charge. He's in charge of the Triskeli, but he says, "I'm not the lawgiver. I only stay as an advisor, and you all must become self-determining."
And here we have a kind of, he does the right thing, but without the proper character set up. Because as an imperialist, he should take the saucer and impose the British Empire on, the world, or at least sizable chunks of it. And he doesn't. He decides that the Triskeli are better off out of human affairs. And so he'll take them away to the stars. And as an old man, he's not going to live very long, but he will give them some advice before he dies. But he, has a literary heel-face turn away from being a British imperialist.
Well, and he even says, they offered me anything if I brought the saucer back, and I really should do this, but...
And the Doctor kind of, I forget if it's here or later, he kind of talks about why it would be really bad for humanity, for the British Empire to get this technology at this point, and how it would change Britain in the future to be, I mean, essentially he kind of predicts that Britain would end up being like the Nazis, like if they had such total control and overwhelming overwhelming use of force, that they could, that they would end up being tyrants of the world. So, which is an interesting thought experiment there.
But if you look at the history of the British Empire, that's what happened when they did have the overwhelming, especially naval technology of the time.
Yeah.
And we're tyrants.
Well,
naval and military.
They weren't Nazis.
Right.
They weren't Nazis, but they were the tyrants of the time. I mean let's be honest. The British Empire was not the most gentle in some places.
Sure. Yes, in Africa and in India. Yeah.
And going back historically, nobody's ancestors were the most gentle.
I know that. I know that. But
yeah, no empire ever was built without a lot of bloodshed and pain on behalf of those conquered. That's for sure. But I think the Doctor's kind of warning, it would be like, with this technology, it would be the worst ever. I think that's probably reasonable to say. And so the Doctor, meanwhile, promises Tamworth that he's going to save the R101, which is an interesting promise given the history
Well,
that
he's going to try to.
Right.
He says, I'll do
Which
what I can. I took that as meaning, yeah, I'd like to, but don't count on it, bud.
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably what he, because the Doctor is always, from a certain point of view, sort of way of talking about things. So they're back on the airship. The chief steward is sent to feed the Vortisaur, but it ends up attacking him. The Doctor finds out that Rathbone, meanwhile, back on the ship, has stolen the Uncreator's Triskelion weapon. It's in the shape of the symbol of the Triskeli, but it's sort of like a laser gun sort of thing. It's essentially.
Also, there's a moment in here where the Doctor is trying to get Charley off the ship. He's sensed something about her that you don't really belong here.
Yeah.
And he's trying to get her to leave because actually first he encourages her to stay on the saucer.
Right.
It's like, you don't have to go back to the ship. You can stay on the saucer and go explore the cosmos and everything like that, which she's clearly interested in doing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, nope, I'm heading to Singapore. And even though she's already been told the R101 is going to crash, she says, we don't have to be on it. Parachutes, I saw them.
Yeah.
Right.
So she is going to go back to the R101 and jump off it with a parachute and take the Doctor with her, and they can continue their adventures in her mind.
And meanwhile, the Doctor has to get this weapon from Rathbone because, again, if he contaminates history with this weapon, takes it back to Britain as he's trying to do, that will cause major historical disruptions.
Also, Frayling. Now, Frayling has had a bit of a character arc. He's the designer, you'll remember.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
he was very meek and always being put upon by Tamworth. And he's been the voice of reason this whole time. He's very cautious. But during the confrontation with the Uncreators, the Doctor encouraged him to get in touch with his inner savage and roar at them.
Right.
And he has had a face heel turn. So now he is, and I should probably explain what that language is since I've used it twice. It's from wrestling.
Yep.
There are two kinds of wrestlers: heels, which are villains, and baby faces, which are the good guys. And so in American wrestling, and this is the wrestling for entertainment as opposed to the serious sport of wrestling. But in this kind of wrestling, you'll have storylines for your persona as a wrestler. And if you switch from being a villain to a hero, that's a heel face turn. And if you switch from being a hero to a villain, it's a face heel turn. And professional wrestlers have multiple turns during the course of their career. And here, Frayling, now that he's gotten in touch with his inner savage, has had a face heel turn. And so he wants to take the Triskeli weapon back and use it to further the British Empire.
Right. And so the Doctor has to end up chasing down Rathbone, and he ends up hitting, punching Rathbone to take the weapon for him. And he realizes that the airship has to crash to preserve history. And then they also stumble upon the loose Vortisaur. And they're all up. The Doctor and Charley are up in the big gas chamber, that big envelope, above the gondola that is underneath, that's got the living quarters in it. So they're in the gas chamber, and he notes that the ship barely flies on a wing and a prayer. It's not a very safe thing. It's precarious at all times. And he notes that the Vortisaur rakes the outer hull, it would make the ship explode. And because the ship is getting very close to that moment when it's supposed to crash, and Rathbone attacks and cuts open the hull of the ship, and the Doctor throws the Triskelion out, and Rathbone jumps for it and falls out trying to get it. There's that climactic moment. And the Doctor, meanwhile, tries to save him, ends up hanging outside the ship, and he's about to fall until the Vortisaur comes along, and he and Charley jump aboard and ride it down. This is what saves the Doctor from the ship. And this was the Doctor talking about riding Vortisaurs back at the Academy. This is where we pay off that statement. So this is what ends up saving the Doctor and Charley from the crash of the R101. And meanwhile, Frayling and the others on board, who now they're resigned to their fate. They know they're going to crash. There's nothing to save them. So they keep a stiff upper lip and raise a toast of champagne as the airship crashes in a classic Edwardian British gesture. After the crash, the Vortisaur becomes afraid of Charley for some reason, and the Doctor reasons it's because Charley was supposed to have died and has now changed the future, and the Vortisaurs are very sensitive to time. But then it suddenly, as the Doctor, I'm not sure exactly what it is that changes here, but suddenly the Vortisaur changes its mind and likes Charley again.
Yeah, we have this, and it's not really clear, but we have the Doctor contemplating the situation because when the Vortisaur is scared of Charley, and she chases off after it, so because she likes it, and so she chases off after it, so the Doctor has time by himself to contemplate this. He realizes that there's a paradox now because he knew there were 54 bodies after the R101 disaster. 54 people died. And Tamworth should have been one of them, but he's not. Right. And because he left on the saucer. And so Charley should have been the 54th body. And she's not. She's now alive. Yep. And so the web of time has been disturbed. And Charley is a living paradox, and that's an intrinsically unstable thing. And it I would guess, is part of why the Vortisaur has an unstable attitude towards her. Mm-hmm. The Doctor is on the point of contemplating, it's my duty as a time traveler. And remember, Time Lords still exist right now to enforce the laws of time. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's my duty as a time traveler to take you back and put you back on the R101 so you can die there. And he's mulling that dark possibility when the Vortisaur comes back with Charley writing it, and it's like, oh, Doctor, he's fine now. We're friends again. And the Doctor thinks, maybe you're not a paradox. Maybe there's some other solution. And so that's why he kind of just goes with it, because he does not want to take Charley back to a certain death.
Yep.
Right. And so Charley invites herself aboard the TARDIS to become a companion. Then she names the Vortisaur Ramsay after the Prime Minister of the day, because he reminds her of him. And then they ride him back across France to where the TARDIS fell to pick up the TARDIS. There is a reference in the previous Eighth Doctor Big Finish story that we did, the Chimes of Midnight, to the R101, but I don't remember what it was. What was the connection?
Well, the Doctor is, so in Chimes of Midnight, Charley is being mentally manipulated and kind of reverting to her childhood, and it's connected with a maid that she knew, a scullery maid that she knew when she was a child, who thinks she never mattered, and it's kind of pulling Charley mentally back into a world where she didn't matter, and the Doctor reminds her of all the things that they've done together in their adventures. So he names, the R101, and he names certain other things that we'll hear in their adventures to convince Charley that what she has done has mattered, and that helps give the maid the confidence that she mattered too, and it undoes the paradox in that episode. But it doesn't fully undo the paradox of Charley. That's a longer story arc.
Okay. Yeah, and I recall the beginning of that is they were supposed to land in Singapore in 1930, and ended up at the mansion and that because of the events of that story. So, very interesting. So that's where the story ends. Any last notes or comments, Father Cory?
Nothing here. Just it was enjoyable to listen to. I actually listened to it as I was doing some of my moving from one parish to the other, and it was, as I was driving, it was a great way to pass the miles. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Jimmy?
Few lines of dialogue I thought were interesting. I liked how when the Doctor is first introduced to Tamworth, he's asked, well, what are you a doctor of? And he says, of most things and some more besides.
Yeah.
I liked how when the Triskeli engineer Prime is asked, where are you from? From further places than you have words for. And then the Doctor is talking about how the lawgiver is the only one of the Triskeli that has free will. So he decides between the other factions. And the Doctor says, I've known tyranny in my time, but this must be the most benign autocracy I've encountered. And if you think about it, it's like in the Keys of Marinus, with the Conscience of Marinus, which was designed to make all the free will decisions for a planet so people didn't have to choose between good and bad anymore.
Right.
Way back in the first Doctor's time. I also liked how Tamworth, even though I think they referred to him early on as being a socialist, but he said he's kind of a funny socialist, which definitely would be true. And he has this kind of mixed background where, he was a military guy, but he's kind of soured on the use of force. And he talks about how he knew that the Versailles Treaty at the end of World War I would only postpone a worse war. Right. So he sees World War II coming. And I thought that was neat. I also just linguistically liked an aspect of the Triskeli language, because even though they're speaking in English, or at least we're hearing them in English, an element of their own language, and you alluded to it, Dom, is peeking through. They reverse the order of modifiers from what we have in English. So instead of Lord Tamworth, whenever the Triskeli are referring to him, it is Tamworth Lord. And you hear the same thing with Uncreator Prime and Engineer Prime and so forth. And what that tells us, the fact they're doing that consistently, tells us that their native language is what's known as a head-first language. The head is the element in a string that controls the other elements. So in the phrase boiling hot water, boiling and hot modify water. So water is the head of that phrase because it's the controlling element. And some languages, like English, are head last. So we say boiling hot water. But other languages are head first languages. So you would say water, hot, boiling. And even though I don't know that the authors of the script or the author of the script knew the term head first, it's clear that the Triskeli are speaking a head first language because of Tamworth Lord and Uncreator Prime and Engineer Prime. And the linguist in me just loves that.
Yeah. Well, you missed the one too, because it goes by so quick. I had to listen. When I listened to the second time, I really caught it. They didn't call him just Doctor. They called him Doctor the.
Yeah. Even the definite articles follow.
Yeah, apparently Picard was also spoke that language because it was tea, Earl Grey.
Right. He was
who knew French was that way.
Yeah. One of the things I noted in this was they kept, I don't know if it was an error or something, but they kept changing Frehling's his rank. He was lieutenant colonel at sometimes, lieutenant commander at other times. I don't know whether it was just a slip of the tongue on the actors, but I thought that was interesting. I did like the Doctor the. Well, the sort of modifies Doctor, doesn't it? He's not just a doctor. He's the Doctor.
The Doctor.
It's the definite article. So yeah, it's a modifier.
Yep. All right. Great. So a lot of fun. I hope the listeners, you all enjoy that as well. I like this as a way of breaking things up from watching Doctor Who to listening once in a while. I enjoyed listening to this sitting on my patio with a nice pipe and a nice drink, and that was a nice way to enjoy it, which is a different way than instead of sitting in front of the TV. But we hope you enjoy it. If you like the audio plays, or if you have another opinion, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of this format and whether there's something you want to see more of. I mean, we hope to do more of these. Those Missy ones, I think, would be a lot of fun to do.
Oh yeah, they would be. Yeah. And I meant to mention. So the first Missy set has been out for a while, and at least at the time of recording, the second Missy set has just come out. So there are now 8 audio plays available with Michelle Gomez as Missy. And the new set, Volume 2, has a story in it. I've begun listening to it already, and it's got a story in it that addresses a question that has been perturbing some fans, which is the relationship of Sacha Dhawan's master to Missy, because the way Missy finishes in the TV show is she and John Sims' master kill each other, with her having no possibility of regenerating. And so that's like the definitive end of the Master. And so some people have said, well, that maybe Sasha Dewan, I mean, he couldn't follow her. Maybe Sasha Dewan is earlier in her timeline since we haven't seen all of the Master's incarnations. But that seems implausible just from a show logic point of view. I think that the MST3K mantra applies here. It's just a show. I should really just relax. Because the rule is, I mean, this is one of the rules of Doctor Who. No matter how much they tell you that the Master is not only dead, but really most sincerely dead, the Master is not dead. It's like, rule number 1 is the Doctor lies. Rule number 2 is the Master is never really dead. So I don't need an explanation for how did Michelle Gomez survive. How did the Master survive Michelle Gomez's Missy death? They've had other instances where the Master, quote unquote, died and then just showed up with no explanation. I'm fine with that. But if you are one of those people who needs an explanation, they provide one in Missy Volume 2 to how Missy survived that death, or how the Master survived Missy's death. And it's a quite interesting one. So even if you're like me and you don't need an explanation, this is a very interesting one.
Cool. All right. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. All right. So that should wrap things up here. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Debbie L., Ann H., Jim G., Tom H., and Aiden L. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits this show for us every week. So, what do you think of Big Finish Storm Warning? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 11th Doctor story, The Hungry Earth. Until then, Father Cory Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Oh boy, a Chris Chibnall episode next time.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, Jimmy, because it's Chris Chibnall, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Right. This is going to be fun.